When I teach about studio lighting, I always describe light like water because the two, they really behave much the same way. And it's no different when I talk about using gels. So I want to show you a little metaphor, a little comparison of how you can figure out the placement and the saturation of gels if you think of it kind of behaving like water. All right, so let's take a look at this example. All right, so imagine my subject here, she's agreed to allow me to douse her in water. So I'm going to take a bucket of water, and it's just regular water, nothing in it. I'm going to douse her from above. So right now, she's going to be soaked, completely soaked head to toe. Now I'm going to take another bucket with blue dye, okay? And I'm going to also pour it on her. So what would that look like? Well, if you imagine it, since she was already wet from the water, that blue dye, it might be there a little bit, but it basically washes out. It doesn't really show up because she was already wet. There's no place for it to absorb, okay? All right, so now let's pretend that she's all dry, and we're going to do it again, but a little bit different this time. So now I'm going to take my regular bucket of water, just plain water, and I'm going to throw it just on this side of her face. So she's going to be soaked on the left-hand side. And now I'm going to take blue dye and throw it from this side. Now what happens? Now she's soaked with regular water on this side, but this side of her face was dry. So when I gave it blue dye, it absorbed. So now it's bright blue. If you do the same with light, you will have the exact same results. So if I can help you remember one thing to really help you understand how gel photography works and gel studio lighting, remember this saying. Gels show up most in shadow areas. Shadow areas are like dry spots. So if you try to put your mind into that place and imagine white light as being regular water, and then your dry spots are your shadows, it's going to make everything make sense. So what we're going to do is I'm actually going to shoot this and show you in action. It really does exactly apply. So can you do me a favor? Can you pop back and put your chair back here for me? All right, so now I'm going to bring in our white light. All right. So I'm imagining that this light is going to be like that bucket of water from above. Okay, no color to it. I'm going to take a shot and we're going to examine it. Okay. So looking at this photo, remember what I said, that gels show up most in shadow areas. So far I've only poured the regular bucket of water over her head. Where are the shadow areas? When I look at the photo, I see that the shadows are here on her cheeks and a little bit underneath her chin. So if I go ahead and I add blue dye, those shadow areas are the only place I'm going to see that color. So my main light in this example was a beauty dish with a grid. And now I'm going to add a zoom reflector with a blue gel. That's going to be my blue dye. So let's introduce that into the equation. Okay, cool. All right. Even with your naked eye, before I've ever taken a photograph, you can actually see what's happening. Where do you see the blue the most? You see it there in her cheekbones and underneath her jawline. You'll also notice that the blue dye that I'm throwing right now is a little bit more to the right-hand side, so it's going to more fill in the shadows on the right-hand side of the frame. But let's actually take a photograph. So looking at this photograph, you see the blue dye, the blue gel, but you only see it in the shadows from the previous photograph. So if we flip back and forth between those two, you could exactly predict where that blue gel is going to show up. Okay, now let's say that you wanted to see even more of this blue gel. You wanted to see more color. How could you see more? Like, what could you do? If I turn up the power of the light, the gel is going to stay in the same place. It might get a little bit brighter, the color might get a little bit richer and it start overpowering the shot, but I mean actually more area of blue. What you need to do is you need to create more shadows from the main light. So I'm going to turn off my blue gel, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my main light. So if I move my light either higher up or further off to the left or right of the frame, I'm going to start introducing more shadows. Perfect. All right. So the blue gel is off. I'm going to take a photo just with that main light. And it's going to show you the shape of the white light on her face. So looking at this photo, and the rule that we said, where is the gel going to show up? It's going to show up anywhere that you see a shadow. So I'm not going to move this light at all. All I'm going to do is turn it back on and take another photo. Same exact thing. And you know exactly where you're going to see that. It fills in all the shadows. So that's why I like it so much, is I can take my white light, I can shape it in the scene, I can watch where the shadows are going, and I know that's where the color is going to show up, wherever those shadows are. But let's say that I wanted even more blue. I wanted the photo to be almost completely blue. So what else can I do? All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to introduce you to something called short light. Short light means that I've moved the light so far off to the side, and I turn my subject, that the shadow side of the face is toward camera. In this case, it's going to just be a sliver of light on the back side of her face, and this will all be shadow, meaning lots of shadows, lots of dry area, lots of blue. So I'm going to turn off my blue dye one more time. And so I'm going to move the light so far off to the side that it would be not great lighting on her face, so I'm actually going to turn you. Perfect. Just like that. So now she's lit on the back side of her face, a little bit of Rembrandt here, but this whole area is going to be shadow. So I'm going to take a photo so you can see that. Beautiful. Can you turn back towards me just a teeny bit and then chin that way? Right there. Perfect. And look your eyes that way. Chin to your right a teeny bit more. Good. And hold still. All right, so taking a look at this. So you can see now there is a ton of shadows because I've moved the light so far behind. And now, when I add my blue gel, all of that shadow area is going to be blue because it's a dry area ready to absorb that light. Perfect. Perfect. So this is why I think it can be quite simple to understand the placement of gels. Place your main light, create shadows wherever those shadows are. They're more than happy to absorb any colored light that you give it. One more thing I want you to notice. If you take a look at the background in these photos, you start to see that in some places the background is turning a little bit blue. And why is that? If you look at the original photos, especially in this last one, that background is a big shadow. It's dark. And so even if a little bit of this light, if this little bit of blue water reaches the background, it's going to absorb. So you'll see a little bit of blue in the background. But we're going to talk about lighting the background much more in depth.